What are microplastics? How can you prevent them? Are they reversible? Microplastics are tiny plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters. Some are so microscopic, they drift through the air like dust. Others wash through rivers, oceans, soil, food systems, and even our homes. Imagine glitter-like fragments floating in seawater, invisible fibers shedding from fleece jackets, tire dust blowing off highways, tiny plastic flakes settling onto our dinner plates from the air. Scientists have even found microplastics in rain, snow, seafood, bottled water, table salt, human blood, lungs, placentas, and even brain tissue. A bit disturbing. So let's get to know the major sources of microplastics. Hello. Welcome to the ShopLogic podcast. I am Adrienne, your host, and today we are going to be discussing plastic. That is this episode's theme. We'll talk about pros and cons, packaging, alternatives, plastic-free brands. Can microplastics be reversed for human health? Innovation, progress. I chose today's theme not just because it's an important one, but because July 3rd was Plastic Bag Free Day, which should honestly just be every day, right? If it's your first time joining me for the ShopLogic podcast, you might be wondering, what is this podcast all about? All things pertaining to ethical consumerism. With me, you can learn how to buy better, read labels, know which brands to support or avoid, and it's all in the name of trying to help animals, people, and the planet, one purchase at a time. Because we shouldn't be so in the dark about what we are supporting with our dollars, with what we are essentially voting for with our money. I discuss food, of course, but also toiletries, cosmetics, fashion, materials, all kinds of categories, because every single day we consume. Even if you don't shop every day, you do eat and drink every day, wear clothing, and are likely shopping pretty frequently, I would imagine. So why not have a bit of an education about what exactly it is we are buying? There is so much suffering in the world as a direct result from consumerism. There is too much garbage in the landfill, too much pollution in our air and waters. It affects wildlife, our human health. There's a lot of factory farming, creating products like meat and dairy and the foods we eat. But even with fruits and vegetables, lots of chemicals and pesticides are involved. That is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to our consumption. So without further ado, let's get back to today's podcast theme, plastics. Long before disposable water bottles and grocery bags, humans used natural quote-unquote plastics like rubber, shellac, horn, and tree resins. Modern synthetic plastic began in the early 1900s when a chemist created bakelite, the first fully synthetic plastic. It was revolutionized manufacturing because it was cheap, durable, lightweight, and moldable. By the 1950s, plastics came into our everyday life with food packaging, toys, clothing fibers, medical equipment, electronics, cars, and furniture. Did you know plastic was once marketed as an environmental miracle because it reduced wood, ivory, metal, and animal product use? But mass production, fossil fuel dependence, and single-use culture created one of the world's largest pollution crises. And yes, fossil fuels were mentioned because did you know that plastic is actually made from fossil fuels? Crazy, right? But what did they ever do before plastic? Have you ever thought about that? Well, long before modern plastic existed, people built entire civilizations using materials from plants, animals, minerals, metals. Everyday life looked, smelled, and even sounded different. Imagine a marketplace in the 17 or 1800s. You had milk in heavy glass bottles, bread wrapped in cloth or paper, water carried in ceramic jugs, combs carved from bone or wood, buttons made from shell or horn, rope woven from hemp, shoes repaired repeatedly instead of discarded, toys carved from wood or sewn from fabric, storage baskets woven from reeds or grasses, soap wrapped in paper, travelers carrying leather trunks instead of polycarbonate suitcases. The world was far less disposable, but also less sterile, less waterproof, and sometimes less convenient. A lot of those materials I just mentioned, like the glass bottles or the ceramic jugs, you can imagine those are quite heavy, not just to carry around, but to transport. So yes, maybe a bit inconvenient, but certainly more eco-friendly in terms of being biodegradable. Wood was one of humanity's most important materials. It was used for furniture, toys, kitchen utensils, tools, containers, buckets, combs, and toothbrush handles. Did you know that early refrigerators often had wooden interiors because certain woods resisted odors naturally? That's interesting. But the downsides of wood was that it was heavy. It can rot or mold. Wood is vulnerable to insects, and wood is not transparent or flexible. Then we have glass. Glass replaced many functions now dominated by plastic. They used glass back in the day for beverage bottles, medicine containers, food storage, windows, and cosmetics. Did you know glass can be recycled endlessly without losing its quality, unlike most plastics, which degrade after recycling? A common misconception is that people often think glass is always greener than plastic. But, like I mentioned, glass is heavier to transport, increasing fuel use. Refillable systems are where glass shines environmentally. Next up, for the materials used a lot more in olden times, metal. They used steel, copper, aluminum, and iron specifically for lunchboxes, food tins, water containers, cooking tools, razors, and toys. Many of those pre-plastic metal goods were designed to be repaired, sharpened, or patched instead of being thrown away. Next up, natural fibers. Natural fibers came from both plants and animals. Some examples would be cotton, hemp, linen, wool, jute, and sisal, all of which we of course still use today, but it was much more prominent back then. They used it for bags, rope, clothing, rugs, packaging, and nets. Hemp was one of the world's most important industrial crops for rope and sails because it was extremely durable. Here's an ethical note. Natural fibers are biodegradable, but industrial farming today can still involve some pesticides, water waste, and labor concerns. They also, of course, used a lot of paper and cardboard. Before plastic wrap, food was wrapped in paper, meat and butcher paper, sandwiches and wax paper, parcels and cardboard and twine. Wax-coated paper was an early moisture-resistant packaging innovation before plastic films became widespread. They also used a lot of ceramics and clay, opposed to plastic. In fact, humans used clay for over 20,000 years. They used it for cooking, water storage, fermentation, plates, and bowls. Some ancient clay water vessels naturally cooled water through evaporation, no electric needed. They also used a lot of leather, bone, shell, and horn before plastic was invented. Some examples would be bone combs, horn spoons, that's odd, shell buttons, leather containers. Historically, many societies wasted far less of slaughtered animals than modern industrial systems, meaning they used every single part they possibly could. At least it was efficient and resourceful. If you are curious about the different properties of materials, what it's used for, if it's biodegradable, that sort of thing, be sure to check out the ShopLogic app, which I created. Just click on the Linktree link in the description, or you'll also find it on the link in my bio on social media. That will take you to the app, which has all types of materials, and you can see all the ones I just mentioned, like hemp and jute and wool. See if it's vegan or not. See what the downsides are, like if they use too much pesticides. Some materials don't really use many at all. It's a really quick and easy way to get a snapshot of what you're buying. Why plastic took over. Plastic boomed in popularity after the 1940s because it was cheap, of course, lightweight, waterproof, moldable, mass-producible, and durable. Industries loved it because it reduced shipping cost and manufacturing complexity. Consumers enjoyed it too, of course, because there was that disposable convenience. It came in bright, attractive colors. It created nearly unbreakable products, and the prices were low. We did lose a lot, though, when plastic came onto the scene, that repair culture. Before cheap plastic, shoes were resold, appliances repaired, jars reused, clothes patched, containers refilled. Modern disposability dramatically changed consumer culture. You may have noticed over the years, if you're old enough, that the quality in our products keeps declining. That's because those companies want you to keep buying it over and over again. Things just aren't made the way that they used to be, which involved a lot of longevity and integrity in the products these companies created. Before, you just kept fixing your things. You kept patching your clothing, repairing instead of throwing away. It was way more eco-friendly, cost-efficient, instead of having to toss something that you've only had for a couple years. Nowadays, it seems like things are inevitably going to have to get replaced every few years. Misconceptions, though, there are some downsides to those good old days. Not everything was sustainable before plastic. The problems included heavy logging, whale oil exploration, ivory harvesting, not good for the elephants, unsafe food storage, yeah, if it wasn't preserved well, lead contaminating materials, and poor sanitation. Plastic solved some real historical problems, especially in the medicine and food preservation areas. But here are some eco-conscious lessons to learn from the past. Many sustainability movements today are reviving some of those older ideas. Eco-minded consumers are utilizing services and products that include refillable bottles, cloth shopping bags, repair cafes, bulk stores, glass storage jars, wooden kitchen tools, compostable packaging. The future may involve combining modern science with older, low-waste tradition. There is, of course, as you can imagine, a dark side to plastic. Some realities include beaches covered in bottle caps and fishing nets, microplastics floating in drinking water, rivers clogged with trash, wildlife entangled in packaging, mountains and heaps of disposable packaging in landfills. Scientists have found microplastics in human blood, deep ocean trenches, Arctic snow, and even rainwater. What are plastics really made from? Most plastics come from fossil fuels like oil, natural gas, and coal. Some of those common plastics are going to include PET number 1, as found in water bottles, HDPE number 2 in milk jugs, PVC number 3 in pipes and vinyl, LDPE number 4 in bags, PP number 5 yogurt cups, PS number 6 styrofoam. Some newer plastics are plant-based or bio-derived, but not all can biodegrade. The biggest concerns with plastic from an ethical standpoint, fossil fuel extraction. Plastic production is tightly linked to the oil and gas industry. Communities near refineries often face air pollution, cancer risks, water contamination, and low-income communities are disproportionately affected. And consider this, when we buy electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, or try to find alternative ways of transportation to try to reduce our carbon footprint, like walking and biking, carpooling, that is going to be a loss of profit for the oil and gas industry. Therefore, they are going to start pushing more plastic onto consumers to compensate that financial loss. So it's good to boycott both as much as possible. Avoid plastic and avoid gas as much as you can. Boycotting plastic entirely is not at all possible, so we just want to greatly reduce our plastic intake and not continue to support the fossil fuel industry. Then there is waste colonialism. Many wealthy countries, like the US, ship plastic waste overseas to poor nations. Countries in Southeast Asia and Africa have become dumping grounds for global plastic waste. Can you believe that? Countries actually ship plastic overseas for them to get rid of. Out of sight, out of mind, I guess that's the mentality. Not a great solution to the problem. And most ocean plastic, by the way, comes from rivers. Most of them are located in Asia. So you can imagine that our waste travels all the way to Asia and Africa and likely ends up in the ocean. Then we also have fair labor issues. Some recycling systems rely on informal waste pickers, unsafe labor conditions, child labor in certain regions. Yet, waste pickers also save enormous amounts of recyclable material from landfills and often receive little recognition. Then there is the animal impact. Millions of animals die annually from entanglement, starvation after eating plastic, toxic exposure. Microplastics also affect soil organisms, fish reproduction, coral reefs, and pollinators. Plastics and veganism. Is plastic vegan? Maybe you never asked yourself that question. A lot of people assume that it automatically is vegan. Not always. Some plastics and additives may involve animal-derived stearic acid, animal testing, glues containing casein or gelatin. Vegan consumers often seek plant-based packaging, cruelty-free testing, refillable systems, minimal packaging overall. Biodegradable plastic does not disappear naturally. Many of those biodegradable plastics require industrial composting, specific heat and humidity, and commercial facilities. Some break into microplastics instead of fully decomposing. And recycling, it doesn't necessarily solve everything. A lot of those plastics are downcycled, burned, landfilled, and exported, although still recycled just in case, you never know. And paper is not necessarily better. Paper can require more water, more land, more energy. What is the best solution? Kind of a no-brainer here. Reduce, reuse, recycle, but also refill and repair. Those are the 5 R's to remember. Did you know plastic can be made from some pretty weird things? Scientists are experimenting with mushrooms, seaweed, shrimp shells, not vegan, obviously, cornstarch, bacteria, and agricultural waste. Let's go ahead and dive a bit deeper into the pros and cons of plastic. Because before you start to think all plastic is just so terrible, believe it or not, plastics are the miracle material, but also the global mess. Let's take a look. Plastic saves lives in medicine. This is one of the strongest arguments in favor of plastics. Medical uses include sterile syringes, IV tubing, blood bags, surgical gloves, prosthetics, inhalers, pacemakers, and PPE masks, all thanks to plastic. Without plastic, infections would rise, medical costs would soar, sterilization would become harder, many disposable safety tools would disappear. Plastic blood bags helped transform emergency medicine because they were lighter and safer than fragile glass bottles. And believe it or not, plastics reduce food waste. The packaging keeps food fresh longer, reduces spoilage, prevents contamination, and lowers the shipping weight. And plastics are energy efficient. There are plastic parts in cars, planes, and bicycles, which helps reduce the weight of the mode of transportation and therefore the fuel consumption. A lighter car is going to use less gas. And yes, the cons would of course be wildlife devastation, sea turtles mistaking plastic bags for jellyfish, birds feeding bottle caps to their chicks, whales washing ashore with stomachs full of plastic debris. Some common offenders that you might want to try to avoid more when it comes to plastic would be snack wrappers, takeout containers, shipping materials, single-use bottles, and plastic bags, of course. Many plastics are designed for minutes of use but persist for centuries. When it comes to human health, what exactly are the concerns pertaining to microplastics? Scientists are still studying it, but here's what we know so far. The concerns would include endocrine disruption, inflammation, chemical additives, and hormone interference. Some of the plastics we use contain chemicals like BPA, phthalates, and flame retardants. So it's best to lower your exposure. Avoid microwaving plastic containers. Store hot food in glass or stainless steel. Reduce heavily packaged foods. Use filtered water instead of disposable plastic bottles. Avoid scratched plastic cookware. If you start to be a bit more mindful and observant looking around your home and your day-to-day life, what do you see that's plastic that could easily be replaced? Because remember, the more we are exposed to plastic in the form of, say, drinking bottles or utensils, that can get into our bloodstream. And if you listened to a previous episode about caffeine and energy, you might remember that even tea bags packaged in individual plastics are going to create potential microplastic ingestion. Let's move right on to plastic alternatives. It's kind of like going a bit back in time with what they used to use, but with a more modern spin. The advantages of using glass would be it's reusable, recyclable endlessly, and inert. Cons, disadvantages, it's heavy and energy intensive to transport. Aluminum, it's recyclable and it's valuable viable for the recycling market, but it involves mining and energy-intensive production. Paper and cardboard is renewable and compostable in some conditions, but it can drive deforestation, and it's often coated with plastic anyway. Bioplastics, what are those made from? Corn, sugarcane, algae, and cassava. But biodegradable doesn't always mean you can put it in your backyard compost. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily marine safe, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's harmless. Therefore, bio-based plastic is not automatically sustainable. Here's what to look for in terms of innovation. Have you seen any refill stores where consumers can refill soap, detergent, grains, oils, all using reusable containers that you bring with you? There's edible packaging. Yes, you heard that right. Scientists are developing seaweed wrappers, edible films, and mushroom packaging. I don't know if I need to eat the container in which my food already comes from, but I appreciate the eco-friendly aspects of that. Compostable material innovations include agricultural waste, bamboo, hemp fiber, and mycelium, which is mushroom roots. That is also an ingredient that is quite innovative. You could even find it at the grocery. Most mainstream grocery stores carry a brand of vegan chicken and steak that is mycelium. It's called Meaty, MEATI is the brand. And yes, that is the only ingredient is mycelium, which is actually pretty healthy and remarkable in terms of taste and texture. Crazy what they can do these days. So what are some ethical brands and organizations that are trying to help our plastic problem? Some reusable and low-waste brands might include Blueland. They make refill cleaning products. And while most of the brand is like 95% vegan, I would say, they're not 100% vegan, so just watch out for that. Package Free Shop. That is a brand that offers low-waste essentials. TerraCycle has hard-to-recycle waste programs. The Ocean Conservancy, they advocate for ocean cleanup. And we have 4Ocean. They create plastic removal initiatives. And Loop, they have a reusable packaging system. Fashion alternatives would be Patagonia. They recycle materials and they have a repair culture. However, I am not a fan of Patagonia because I would say half at least of their products are wool, leather, some variant of animal product. So I see that as a major contradiction because, of course, the overpopulation of livestock animals that are unnaturally bred onto the planet for human use is just contributing to our environmental problems. Another brand for fashion, Girlfriend Collective. They have recycled plastic activewear. Ten Tree, they are lower impact apparel. The vegan and ethical consumer perspective. Well, many vegans and ethical consumers care about plastics because wildlife suffers. Fossil fuel extraction harms ecosystems. Plastic production affects frontline communities. Fast fashion relies heavily on those synthetic fibers. But there are nuances. Synthetic vegan leather avoids animal products, but can use PVC or polyurethane plastics. Not good for the environment. And newer alternatives for materials include cactus leather, pineapple leather, mushroom leather, and apple leather. Pretty remarkable. And those materials can all be found again on the ShopLogic app. You do not need to eliminate all plastic overnight. The biggest wins often come when you reduce supporting single-use packaging, bottled water, fast fashion, and disposable kitchenware. Some practical hacks include carrying reusable shopping bags, using refillable water bottles or thermoses, buying concentrates instead of diluted cleaners, choosing bar soap over bottled soap, buy in bulk whenever practical, and repair items instead of replacing them. One of the products that comes to mind when we're talking about buying concentrates instead of diluted cleaners is laundry detergent. Have you ever thought, why do they have those giant laundry detergent plastic containers full of detergent when really all you need is a small tablet to do the trick? And I'm not even talking about the gel capsules. The gel pods, they make laundry detergent that are in sheets that you simply pull apart and put into the washing machine. All in all, the big picture is plastic itself is not purely evil or purely miraculous. The real problems are overproduction, disposable culture, poor waste systems, fossil fuel dependence, and corporate incentives favoring cheap convenience. For eco-conscious and ethical consumers, the most powerful approach is usually reducing unnecessary single-use plastics, reuse durable items, support better materials and refill systems, push companies towards accountability, and avoid perfectionism. Modern life currently depends on plastic, especially in medicine and technology, but society is slowly moving towards smarter, safer, circular systems. And for our last topic on today's episode, we are going to get right into microplastics. What are microplastics? How can you prevent them? Are they reversible? Microplastics are tiny plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters. Some are so microscopic, they drift through the air like dust. Others wash through rivers, oceans, soil, food systems, and even our homes. Imagine glitter-like fragments floating in seawater, invisible fibers shedding from fleece jackets, tire dust blowing off highways, tiny plastic flakes settling onto our dinner plates from the air. Scientists have even found microplastics in rain, snow, seafood, bottled water, table salt, human blood, lungs, placentas, and even brain tissue. A bit disturbing. So let's get to know the major sources of microplastics. Synthetic clothing, polyester, nylon, acrylic, and spandex, they all shed microscopic fibers when we wash them. Synthetic textiles are estimated to be one of the largest sources of primary microplastic pollution in the oceans. To prevent this from happening, choose natural fibers like organic cotton, hemp, linen, bamboo, lyocell, or tencel. Wash your clothes less often, use cold water and gentler cycles, and air dry whenever possible. Use microfiber catching laundry filters or bags. Some helpful innovations and brands would be Guppy Friend. They have a washing bag which reduces your microfiber shedding into wastewater. Planet Care Filters actually makes washing machine microfiber filters. Tentree emphasizes lower impact materials and tree planting. Next up, for where microplastics most come from would be bottled water. I do not like those single-use water bottles. Very, very toxic in so many ways. Many bottled waters contain microplastic particles from packaging, bottling machinery, caps, and transportation wear. In fact, some studies found bottled water can contain far more microplastics than tap water. That's not really a surprise. You are drinking it from plastic after all. But because these microplastics are so small, we would probably never imagine that we are ingesting them when we sip water from those bottles. To prevent that from happening, use stainless steel or glass bottles. Avoid leaving plastic bottles in heat, that makes it worse. Use filtered tap water. Some ethical brands and products to consider, not sponsored by the way, just relevant to today's theme: Clean Canteen, Hydro Flask, Life Straw Home, and Berkey water filters. Next up for microplastics would be food packaging. Plastic wrappers, takeout containers, tea bags, and food storage can all release particles into our food. To prevent this from happening, store food in glass jars, avoid microwaving plastic, choose loose produce instead of shrink-wrapped produce, and use silicone lids. Some ethical alternatives would be Stasher, that's a brand that makes reusable silicone storage, ZWS Essentials, which creates low-waste alternatives. And next up, tire dust. Did you know that as tires wear down, they release synthetic rubber and plastic particles into air, waterways, and soil? This is one of the least discussed sources of microplastics. And I always thought, I guess a bit naively, that tires were just pure rubber, no plastic, but it makes sense. The synthetic rubber made from plastic is going to make the tires much more lightweight. And tire dust may contribute more microplastic pollution than straws or bags. Some prevention tips: walk, bike, or use public transportation when possible, maintain proper tire pressure, reduce aggressive driving, and hard braking. Researchers are developing biodegradable tire materials, improved road filtration systems, and longer-lasting tires. The next category of where microplastics come from the most: cosmetics and personal care. Some of those scrubs, glitter makeup, toothpaste, and cosmetics historically used plastic microbeads. The good news is that several countries banned rinse-off plastic microbeads. What comes to mind is like that St. Ives exfoliator that we all used in the 90s, or anything with those microbeads in them. And I'm willing to bet the countries that banned it are probably Scandinavian, and sadly not here in the US, where we let anything happen. A misconception: this biodegradable glitter you might have heard of is not always truly biodegradable. And if you're going to buy cosmetics and personal care, a great brand to choose is Ethique, Lush Cosmetics, and Meow Meow Tweet. Although Lush Cosmetics was also recently mentioned on a ShopLogic podcast episode regarding their high involvement using palm oil in their products, but that's also kind of one of those unavoidable things. Just check the label, as always. Health concerns pertaining to microplastics: well, inflammation, hormone disruption, chemical exposure, respiratory irritation, and potential impacts on fertility and organs. Microplastics can also carry pesticides, heavy metals, PFAS, forever chemicals, and industrial pollutants. So how can you reverse microplastics? Because we've all ingested them in some way, shape, or form. I hate to break it to you, but there is currently no proven medical method to completely reverse or remove all of the microplastics from the body. Anyone promising such a miracle detox is likely exaggerating, but there are practical ways to reduce your exposure and support your overall health. First of all, you can improve indoor air. Indoor dust is a major exposure source for microplastics. You can vacuum with HEPA filters, open windows when the outdoor air quality is good. Instead of dry dusting, you can use a damp or moist rag to dust off surfaces. Use air purifiers with HEPA filtration, and some brands you might want to check out would be Blue Air and Coway. The next tip: reduce ultra-processed foods. So many issues with the over-processed foods. Highly processed foods often involve more plastic contact during manufacturing and packaging. Vegan-friendly whole foods that are better choices when packaged correctly would be beans, grains, fresh vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. The next tip: filter drinking water. Some filters may help reduce certain microplastic particles. There is a reverse osmosis system, activated carbon filters, and ultrafiltration systems. Avoid heating plastic. Yes, I have recently stopped putting any and all plastic in the dishwasher, because I realized, like, if you have any plastic lids, for instance, even if it says they're dishwasher safe, they don't really get that dirty, so I just rinse them off in the sink and let them air dry instead of having plastic go into the dishwasher, get really hot and steamy, and then shed all those microplastics all over the dishes and then into the dish water, which inevitably will go back to the water system. So yes, avoid heating plastics. Heat increases plastic breakdown. Instead of reheating your leftovers in plastic, use ceramic, glass, or stainless steel containers. I like to reheat leftovers, if I can, on the stovetop instead of the microwave. I don't know what it is about the microwave. I try to use it as little as possible. I'm a bit of a skeptic with the microwaves. Let's leave this episode today on a positive note. There is innovation and progress. Believe it or not, there are plastic-eating organisms. Researchers are studying waxworms, mealworms, fungi, bacteria, all of which may help degrade plastics. We have those refill and reuse systems from Loop, Blue Land, and Clean Cult. We have ocean cleanup efforts. Organizations removing plastic pollutions include the Ocean Cleanup and 5 Gears Institute. Some additional low-waste hacks: switch from plastic sponges to compostable brushes. Buy in bulk using those reusable jars. Use wooden or stainless steel utensils. With laundry, wash full loads only. Use front-loading washers when possible, and avoid fast fashion synthetics. And when shopping, choose bar soap and shampoo bars. Prefer glass, metal, or paper packaging, and support repair culture instead of disposable culture. So now you might have a more balanced perspective, knowing that plastic is not universally evil. It has those benefits in medicine, food safety, accessibility, renewable energy, and transportation efficiency. The larger issue is overproduction, disposability, poor waste systems, and unnecessary single-use consumption. The future will likely include smarter materials, circular economies, refill systems, better regulation, and consumer pressure for ethical innovation. For the eco-conscious and ethical consumer, reducing microplastic exposure is less about perfection and more about consistent practical shifts that support healthier people, animals, oceans, and workers alike. Maybe before you joined me on today's episode, you were wondering, how could plastic possibly be good? What exactly is microplastic and what are the consequences? What are the risks of ingesting microplastic? What are some brands that are going plastic free or offer more sustainable solutions to reduce plastic? What are some easy tips and tricks for reducing my personal plastic consumption? And I hope I answered all of your questions in today's episode. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave a message. Be sure to follow this podcast and find ShopLogic on social media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. As always, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode, and be sure to tune in next time. Bye.